The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports for my accounting firm. My father's voice cut through the speaker like a blade, demanding something so outrageous I thought he was joking. He wanted me to hand over my 4-bedroom house to my younger brother Marcus because Marcus was starting a family, and I was just single with no life. I sat there in complete disbelief, staring at the house I had bought at 26, after working 3 jobs through college, the successful practice I had built from absolutely nothing. His ultimatum rang in my ears as the call ended. Family comes first. Leonard and Marcus needs that house more than you do. Growing up in suburban Cleveland, I learned early that in our family hierarchy, Marcus occupied a throne while I scraped by in the shadows. 3 years separated us in age, but light years divided us in our father's affection. Every achievement I earned through grinding effort became background noise to Marcus's effortless charm. While I stocked shelves and swept floors at Patterson's hardware store every weekend from 14 onwards, Marcus received brand new cars for his birthdays. A cherry red Mustang at 16, a loaded pickup truck at 18. I drove a rusted Honda Civic that I bought with my own savings, proud of every dent because it represented my independence. The pattern revealed itself in countless small cruelties disguised as family dynamics. When Marcus crashed the family sedan into a telephone pole after a night of underage drinking, our father's fury landed squarely on my shoulders. "You should have been watching out for him." He raged, his face purple with indignation. "What kind of older brother lets this happen? I was 19 away at college, 300 miles from the accident scene, but somehow responsible for Marcus's poor choices. My academic achievements faded into invisibility next to Marcus's athletic pursuits. The night I graduated summa cum laude from Ohio State with my accounting degree, our family celebration dinner got canceled. Marcus had a JV football game that same evening, and naturally the whole family needed to be there cheering from the bleachers. I ate alone at a Denny's near campus, my diploma certificate propped against the salt shaker, wondering why I bothered trying so hard. Marcus drifted through 3 different colleges, like a tourist sampling vacation destinations. First, Ohio University for 2 semesters before deciding business wasn't his calling. Then a brief stint at Cleveland State studying communications, abandoned when he discovered the coursework required actual studying. Finally, a community college attempt at sports management that lasted exactly 1 semester before he declared higher education wasn't his thing. Each failure earned sympathetic headshakes from our parents and renewed financial support. Meanwhile, I graduated debt-free through scholarships and work-study programs, immediately landing a position with a respected firm in Columbus. But success felt hollow when nobody seemed to notice or care. The breaking point came during my 25th birthday dinner. Our father spent the entire meal detailing his plans to help Marcus find his path, including funding a cross-country trip to discover himself. When I mentioned my promotion to senior associate, earning praise from partners twice my age, the conversation shifted immediately back to Marcus's spiritual journey of self-discovery. That night, I made the decision that changed my trajectory. I would move far enough away to build a life free from constant comparison and diminishment. Denver called to me with its promise of mountain air and fresh starts, 3 states, and a world away from the suffocating dynamics of home. Building my accounting practice from zero in a new city tested every skill I possessed. I rented a tiny office above a coffee shop, networked relentlessly at Chamber of Commerce events, and worked 18-hour days to establish credibility. Slowly, methodically, I built a client base through referrals and reputation. The house came 3 years later, a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in a family-friendly neighborhood near excellent schools. I chose the location deliberately, envisioning my own future family someday. The mortgage application process felt like validation of every sacrifice, every weekend spent working instead of partying, every dollar saved instead of spent on immediate gratification. My phone buzzed with a group text message interrupting my reminiscing. The sender was my mother, and the image made my stomach drop. Marcus stood beaming in front of a jewelry store, his arm around a blonde woman I recognized from his social media posts as Sarah. Her left hand displayed a diamond ring that probably cost more than my first car. The caption read, "Your brother is finally settling down. Dad thinks you should help him get established since you're doing so well." The implications hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just an announcement of Marcus's engagement. This was the opening move in a campaign I hadn't seen coming, a coordinated family effort to extract something valuable from my success. The timing felt too convenient, too calculated, coming just days after my father's outrageous demand for my house. The harassment began immediately and intensified with each passing day. My father's calls arrived like clockwork every morning at 7:30, precisely timed to disrupt my breakfast routine and set an anxious tone for the entire day. His arguments followed the same manipulative script, refined through repetition until each word carried maximum emotional impact. "Marcus and Sarah need that house. Leonard." He would begin, his voice carrying the weight of paternal authority. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, that beautiful kitchen. Perfect for raising children. Meanwhile, you're rattling around in all that space like a marble in a shoebox. It's wasteful. It's selfish. He painted elaborate pictures of Marcus and Sarah's future family, describing grandchildren I hadn't met playing in the backyard. I had landscaped myself. He detailed the nursery they would create in the bedroom I used as my home office, the family dinners they would host in the dining room, where I worked late into the night building my business. "Other sons sacrifice for family" became his favorite refrain. The Kowalskis down the street, their oldest boy gave up his condo to help his sister through her divorce. The Henderson's son moved back home to care for his aging parents. That's what family means, Leonard. That's what loyalty looks like. The guilt tactics escalated when direct appeals failed. He questioned my values, my priorities, my very character. "I don't understand what happened to you out there in Colorado," he would say, his voice heavy with manufactured disappointment. "We raised you better than this. We taught you about family responsibility." Then came the threats, subtle at first, but growing more explicit. "Your mother and I won't be around forever, you know. When we're gone, do you want Marcus to remember how his brother abandoned him when he needed help most? Do you want to spend the rest of your life knowing you could have made a difference, but chose selfishness instead?" My mother played her role perfectly, the sympathetic mediator caught between 2 stubborn men. She would call separately, her voice soft and pleading. "Your father means well, honey. He just wants the family to stay close. Maybe there's some way you could help Marcus without giving up everything you've worked for." But underneath her gentle words lay the same expectation, the same assumption that my needs mattered less than Marcus's wants. "Marcus has always looked up to you," she would say, rewriting history with impressive creativity. "He needs his big brother's support now more than ever." I tried explaining my own perspective, the years of effort that went into acquiring the house, my plans for my own future family. These explanations bounced off my parents like raindrops on concrete. They had already decided what was fair, what was right, what was expected. The house itself represented more than just real estate to me. Every corner held memories of accomplishment. Every room told the story of dreams, realized through determination. The kitchen, where I had installed custom cabinets with my own hands during weekends and evenings. The master bedroom, where I had stripped and refinished the original hardwood floors until they gleamed like mirrors. The backyard garden had taken 2 full seasons to establish. I researched native Colorado plants, designed irrigation systems, and spent countless hours nurturing seedlings into mature landscaping. Apple trees lined the back fence, planted with visions of autumn harvests and spring blossoms. The neighborhood had welcomed me warmly, despite my outsider status. Block parties, snow removal cooperation, and friendly waves from front porches had created a sense of community I had never experienced growing up. Mrs. Peterson next door brought cookies every Christmas. The Johnsons across the street invited me to their 4th of July barbecues. This wasn't just where I lived. It had become home in the truest sense. My computer screen lit up with a Facebook notification that made my blood run cold. Family members I hadn't spoken to in months were commenting on Marcus's posts congratulating him on his new house. Aunt Helen wrote, "So proud of Leonard for helping his little brother." Cousin Dave added, "Family first." Good man. Leonard. The betrayal cut deeper than any previous manipulation. My parents had apparently told the entire extended family that I had already agreed to hand over my house. Marcus's Facebook post showed pictures of the exterior taken obviously without my permission, with captions about moving into this beautiful place soon and grateful for family support during this exciting time. Comments poured in from relatives praising my generosity, congratulating Marcus on his good fortune, and sharing their own stories about family members helping each other. Each notification felt like another nail in a coffin I hadn't even known was being built around me. The most painful comment came from my grandmother, my father's mother, who had always been fair and loving to both Marcus and me. "Leonard, you're such a good brother. This is exactly what your grandfather would have done for family. So proud of the man you've become." Seeing my grandmother's praise for something I hadn't actually done based on lies my parents had spread broke something inside me. They weren't just pressuring me privately anymore. They had created a public narrative that painted me as either generous or, if I refused to comply, a liar who had gone back on his word to family. The family pressure campaign expanded beyond my parents into a coordinated assault on my character and resolve. Each relative seemed to receive their marching orders, calling at strategic intervals to express their disappointment in my apparent change of heart. Aunt Helen, my father's sister, called on a Wednesday afternoon while I was meeting with potential clients. Her voice carried the distinctive tone of someone who believed she held moral authority. "Leonard, honey, I don't understand what's gotten into you. Your parents are beside themselves with worry. This isn't like you to be so heartless." She recounted elaborate stories about family members throughout history who had sacrificed for the greater good. Great-uncle Robert, who gave up his farm to help his brother's widow. Cousin Margaret, who took in 3 nephews after their parents died. Each tale carried an implicit message: real family members put others first, and my resistance marked me as somehow defective. "Your brother is starting his life with Sarah." She continued, her voice growing more emotional. "Don't you want him to have the same opportunities you've had? Don't you remember what it was like to be young and in love, needing a fresh start?" The irony burned like acid. Marcus had been handed fresh starts his entire life, while I had clawed my way to success through pure determination. But Aunt Helen's version of history painted me as the privileged one who owed his less fortunate sibling a helping hand. Cousin Dave took a different approach, appealing to practical considerations and male bonding. "Look, man, I get that you're attached to the house, but Marcus is family, you know, blood. And honestly, what do you need all that space for anyway? 4 bedrooms for one guy, that's just showing off." His words stung because they echoed my father's arguments. But coming from someone closer to my age, they felt like peer judgment rather than parental pressure. "Sarah's pregnant, dude. They need to nest build something stable. You've got your career figured out, your life on track. Help a brother out." The pregnancy announcement hit like a physical blow. Nobody had mentioned this crucial detail during weeks of pressure about the house. Marcus and Sarah weren't just planning for children someday. They had a baby coming soon. The implications reframed every conversation, every demand, every guilt trip in a new and more urgent light. Marcus himself began appearing at my office, creating scenes that threatened my professional reputation. The first visit occurred during a consultation with potential clients, a young couple seeking help with their small business taxes. Marcus burst through the reception area without an appointment, his voice carrying throughout the building. "Leonard, we need to talk about the house situation. Sarah's morning sickness is getting worse and we can't stay in that tiny apartment much longer." He gestured dramatically, his voice pitched for maximum impact. "The baby needs space, man. A real nursery, not some corner of a studio apartment." My potential clients exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly wondering what kind of personal drama they were witnessing. I excused myself, led Marcus to a conference room, and closed the door firmly. "You can't do this here," I said, keeping my voice level despite the fury building inside me. "This is my workplace. These are my clients." "Then stop avoiding family," he shot back. "Dad says you won't return his calls. Mom's crying every night because you're tearing the family apart over a stupid house." The accusation that I was destroying family unity by refusing to surrender my home marked a new low in the manipulation campaign. Marcus had somehow convinced himself, or been convinced by our parents, that his needs automatically superseded mine, that my success existed solely to serve his convenience. The scene repeated itself twice more over the following weeks, each time more disruptive than the last. Marcus brought Sarah on the second visit, her pregnancy clearly visible tears streaming down her face as she pleaded for understanding. On the third occasion, he arrived with printed documents showing the apartment they were renting, emphasizing how cramped and unsuitable it was for a growing family. My business partner, Janet, finally pulled me aside after the third incident. "Leonard, I don't know what's going on with your family, but it's affecting our reputation. The Hendersons called to cancel their appointment after witnessing that scene last week. We can't have drama disrupting client meetings." The professional consequences of family pressure added another layer of stress to an already impossible situation. I had worked years to build credibility in Denver's competitive accounting market. Allowing family dysfunction to damage that reputation would betray every sacrifice I had made to escape Ohio in the first place. My father's final threat arrived in a registered letter, formal and devastating. He outlined his intention to change his will, removing me as beneficiary and transferring my inheritance directly to Marcus. "Since you've shown such disregard for family loyalty," the letter read, "I see no reason to reward that attitude in my final wishes." The inheritance itself mattered less than the symbolic rejection it represented. My father was essentially disowning me for refusing to surrender my life's work to my brother's convenience. The message was clear: comply or lose your family forever. That evening, I returned home to find my worst nightmare realized. Marcus and Sarah were inside my house measuring rooms and discussing renovation plans as if they already owned the property. They had somehow obtained keys and treated my private sanctuary like their personal shopping mall. Sarah stood in what would become the nursery, her hands pressed against her stomach, describing paint colors and furniture arrangements to Marcus. He nodded enthusiastically, already planning where to knock down walls to create more space. "How did you get in here?" I demanded, my voice sharp with outrage. Marcus held up a set of keys, jangling them casually. "Dad had copies made from your spare set. Said we should start planning the layout since you're being difficult about the transition timeline." The violation of my personal space, the assumption that my property was already theirs, the casual dismissal of my rights as the actual homeowner, it all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. This wasn't about helping family anymore. This was about taking what I had built and calling it generosity. "Get out," I said quietly, my voice carrying a finality that made them both stop talking. "Get out of my house right now and don't come back." Sarah burst into tears, clutching Marcus's arm. "But the baby needs a nursery." We've already given this address on all our official paperwork. The final revelation hit like a sledgehammer. They had been so confident in their ability to manipulate me into compliance that they had already committed to living in my house. Official documents, change of address forms, perhaps even utilities transfers. They had assumed control of my property before I had even agreed to surrender it. The confrontation with my father reached a boiling point when I called him immediately after ejecting Marcus and Sarah from my house. My anger had transformed from frustration into something harder and more focused, a determination to end this manipulation permanently. "They broke into my house, Dad," I said without preamble when he answered. "They had keys you somehow arranged, and they were measuring rooms like they already owned the place. This ends now or I'm calling the police." His response revealed more than he intended. "Don't be so dramatic, Leonard. They're family, not burglars. Marcus deserves everything I can give him as my real son, and if you can't understand that, maybe you don't belong in this family at all." The phrase hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire. "Your real son," I repeated slowly. "What exactly does that mean?" I heard him catch his breath, realizing his mistake. "I meant my son, who appreciates family, who understands loyalty, not like some people who run away to Colorado and forget where they came from." But the damage was done. The slip of tongue, combined with years of observing excessive favoritism, planted a seed of suspicion that began growing immediately. Why had Marcus always been treated differently? Why did my father's generosity toward him seem unlimited, while every kindness toward me came with conditions and expectations? The more I thought about it, the more inconsistencies emerged from my childhood memories. My father's protectiveness of Marcus had always seemed extreme, even for a favored child. Business trips that coincided with Marcus's important events, but never mine. Private conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Financial generosity that exceeded normal parental indulgence. I decided to visit home the following weekend ostensibly to continue the house discussion, but actually to investigate my growing suspicions. My parents still lived in the same split-level ranch where I had grown up, and my mother's habit of keeping every document in meticulously organized files gave me an opportunity I couldn't pass up. Saturday morning, while my parents attended their weekly grocery shopping trip, I searched through the home office where my mother maintained decades of family records. Birth certificates, medical records, school documents, insurance papers. She had saved everything in clearly labeled filing cabinets. Marcus's birth certificate told an interesting story when examined carefully. The hospital listed was different from where I had been born, despite my parents living in the same house. The attending physician's name was unfamiliar, though my pediatrician had delivered dozens of babies in our neighborhood over the years. More intriguing were the dates surrounding Marcus's birth. Medical records showed my mother had been hospitalized 3 weeks before Marcus's official birth date, supposedly for complications. But a receipt I found for a weekend getaway my parents had taken suggested they were out of town when those complications allegedly occurred. The pieces started forming a picture I hadn't wanted to see. Frank Morrison, my father's longtime business partner and close family friend, appeared in family photos with unusual frequency around the time of Marcus's birth. He had been present at every one of Marcus's birthday parties, graduation ceremonies, and major life events. His own marriage had ended in divorce around the time my parents went through what they called a rough patch in their relationship. Frank's involvement in our family had always seemed excessive for a business relationship. He funded family vacations, contributed to college accounts, and maintained an unusually close relationship with my mother. At family gatherings, he and my father would exchange meaningful looks that I had never understood as a child. The most damning evidence came in a manila envelope hidden behind other files labeled simply personal. Inside were documents related to a paternity test dated when Marcus was 6 months old. The results were inconclusive, but the fact that a test had been conducted at all suggested serious questions about Marcus's parentage. A series of checks from Frank to my father disguised as business expenses, but occurring monthly for 24 years, told the rest of the story. The amounts corresponded exactly with major expenses in Marcus's life: school tuition car purchases, college costs, even the engagement ring he had recently bought for Sarah. My father hadn't been generously supporting his favorite son with family money. Frank Morrison had been secretly funding Marcus's entire lifestyle, using my father as a front to avoid admitting his biological connection to the child, born during his affair with my mother. The revelation explained everything. Marcus wasn't just my father's favorite child. He wasn't my father's child at all. The preferential treatment, the unlimited financial support, the desperate desire to secure Marcus's future with my house. It all made perfect sense when viewed through the lens of paternal guilt and biological truth. My mother found me sitting in the office when they returned from shopping, the documents spread across the desk like evidence in a courtroom. Her face went white when she saw what I had discovered, and she sank into the chair across from me without saying a word. "How long were you going to let this continue?" I asked quietly. Her voice came out as a whisper. "Your father threatened to leave if I ever told anyone. Said it would destroy Marcus, who never did anything wrong. Said it would tear the family apart. More than it's already torn apart." I gestured at the evidence between us. "Mom, Frank has been paying for Marcus's entire life while Dad takes credit. And now they want me to give up my house to continue this charade." She began crying. Then deep sobs that seemed to release decades of suppressed guilt and fear. "I wanted to tell you so many times, Leonard. The way they treated you like you didn't matter as much. It wasn't fair. It was never fair." "Does Marcus know?" I asked. She shook her head. "He has no idea. As far as he's concerned, your father is his biological dad, and Frank is just a close family friend who's always been generous." The situation was even more complicated than I had imagined. Marcus wasn't a villain in this story. He was another victim of the adults' lies and deception. He had grown up receiving preferential treatment without understanding why, developing expectations and attitudes based on false information about family dynamics. But knowing the truth also gave me power. My father's manipulation campaign was based on the assumption that I would eventually cave to family pressure and biological obligation. Once I understood that the obligations weren't actually biological, and that the family dynamics were built on decades of lies, I could respond from a position of strength rather than guilt. Frank Morrison had been hiding behind my father's facade for 24 years, avoiding the responsibilities and consequences of his choices. My father had accepted another man's child while treating his actual son as a secondary priority. My mother had enabled the entire deception through decades of silence, and I had been expected to sacrifice my life's work to maintain their comfortable fiction. Armed with devastating truth, I sat across from my mother in the family kitchen where countless meals had been shared, countless arguments had unfolded, and now the biggest revelation of our family's history was being processed in painful silence. She looked older than her 58 years, her hands trembling as she reached for tissues. "Leonard, please," she whispered, her voice breaking with each word. "If this comes out, it will destroy Marcus. He's getting married, having a baby. Sarah doesn't know anything about this. It would ruin their relationship, maybe their whole future together." I studied my mother's face, searching for any sign that she understood the irony of her plea. For decades, she had watched my father treat me like a second-class citizen in my own family, while showering attention and resources on Marcus. Now she worried about protecting Marcus from truth, while expecting me to continue absorbing the consequences of their deception. "What about my future, Mom?" I asked. "What about the years I've spent wondering why nothing I did was ever good enough? What about the house I worked 3 jobs to afford that Dad wants to hand over to his business partner's son?" She flinched at the bluntness of my words, but couldn't deny their accuracy. Your father loves you, Leonard. This situation with Frank and Marcus doesn't change that. It's just complicated. Love doesn't feel like this, I replied. Love doesn't demand that I give up everything I've built to maintain someone else's lies. Over the following days, the pressure campaign continued escalating while I processed the full implications of my discovery. Marcus and Sarah resumed their aggressive pursuit of my house, apparently convinced that persistence would eventually wear down my resistance. They began parking their car in my driveway during business hours, telling neighbors they were the new owners, and I was helping them transition into the property. My father enlisted additional family members in his cause, each one carrying pieces of the false narrative about my supposed agreement to transfer the house. Uncle Robert called to congratulate me on my generosity. Cousin Jennifer sent a card praising my family loyalty. Each interaction reinforced the public fiction that I had already committed to giving Marcus what he wanted. Meanwhile, Frank Morrison maintained his role as the generous family friend appearing at gatherings to offer advice and support to Marcus about home ownership and financial responsibility. Watching him play concerned mentor to his biological son, while my father took credit for Frank's decades of financial support, filled me with disgust. The most infuriating aspect was Marcus's complete obliviousness to the truth. He genuinely believed our father's generosity came from natural parental love rather than guilt about concealing his real parentage. He had developed a worldview where his needs naturally took priority, because that's how family relationships had always functioned in his experience. During one particularly tense phone call, Marcus laid out his timeline for taking possession of my house. Sarah's due date is in 4 months, so we need to be moved in and settled within 6 weeks. That gives us time to set up the nursery and get everything baby-proofed. The casual assumption that my schedule should revolve around his reproductive timeline demonstrated how completely he had internalized the family's preferential treatment patterns. In Marcus's mind, my resistance was simply an obstacle to be overcome, rather than a legitimate expression of my rights as the property owner. I've already given notice at our apartment, he continued. The landlord has new tenants moving in next month, so really we don't have any choice but to move into your place. This revelation added another layer of manipulation to the campaign. By committing themselves to timelines that assumed my compliance, Marcus and Sarah had created artificial urgency designed to pressure me into immediate decision-making. They were essentially holding themselves hostage to force my cooperation. My father's role in orchestrating this pressure became clearer during a conversation with my mother. He told Marcus that you had agreed in principle but were just being difficult about the details, she admitted. Marcus thinks this is all just paperwork and logistics at this point. The deception ran deeper than I had imagined. My father wasn't just pressuring me to give up my house. He was lying to Marcus about my supposed agreement, setting up a scenario where I would appear to be breaking promises I had never made. Dad's also been talking to Frank about helping with the transition costs, my mother continued. Moving expenses, utility deposits, that sort of thing. Frank seems excited about Marcus getting settled in such a nice neighborhood. Of course, Frank was excited. His biological son was about to inherit a beautiful house in an upscale Denver neighborhood without having to work for it, pay for it, or even acknowledge who was really making it possible. Frank got to play the generous family friend while avoiding the responsibilities of actual fatherhood. I spent the next week developing a strategy that would address all the layers of deception simultaneously. The situation required more than just refusing to give up my house. It demanded a complete exposure of the lies that had shaped our family dynamics for over 2 decades. First, I documented everything. The harassment from family members, the unauthorized entries into my house, the public statements about my supposed generosity. All of it went into detailed records that could support legal action if necessary. I hired a lawyer to advise me about property protection and family law implications. Next, I gathered additional evidence about Marcus's true parentage. Public records, medical documents, financial transactions, anything that could substantiate what I had discovered in my mother's files. The pattern of Frank's payments to my father was particularly damning when viewed alongside Marcus's major life expenses. Finally, I planned a family gathering that would force everyone involved to confront reality simultaneously. I couldn't allow the lies to continue indefinitely destroying my relationship with Marcus, while enabling Frank's cowardice and my father's manipulation. The invitation went out to immediate family, plus Frank Morrison ostensibly for a Sunday dinner, where we could work out the house situation once and for all. I rented a private room at a local restaurant, ensuring neutral territory where emotions couldn't escalate into physical confrontation. My father seemed pleased that I had finally agreed to discuss terms, apparently believing that family pressure had succeeded in wearing down my resistance. Marcus and Sarah arrived excited about finalizing their housing arrangement. Frank came as the supportive family friend, ready to offer wisdom and encouragement. None of them suspected that I had prepared evidence packets for each person present, carefully organized documents that would expose 24 years of lies in a single devastating presentation. The truth was about to explode through our family like a bomb, and I was the only one who knew it was coming. The private dining room at Romano's Italian restaurant felt charged with anticipation as our family gathered around the large circular table. I had chosen this venue specifically for its soundproofing and discreet atmosphere, knowing that the conversation ahead would require privacy and careful management. My father sat directly across from me, his posture confident and relaxed, clearly believing he had finally forced me into submission. Marcus and Sarah flanked him on either side, Sarah's pregnancy now showing prominently as she entered her second trimester. My mother chose a seat that allowed her to observe everyone's reactions, her face already showing the strain of keeping secrets. Frank Morrison completed the circle, positioning himself between my parents in his usual role as the wise family friend. At 62, he maintained the silver-haired dignity of a successful businessman, completely comfortable in his deception after decades of practice. "Leonard." My father began, his voice carrying the tone of someone about to claim victory. "I'm glad you finally decided to be reasonable about this situation. Marcus and Sarah need to start making concrete plans." I nodded calmly, reaching into the briefcase I had placed beside my chair. "You're absolutely right, Dad. It's time for everyone to understand exactly what's happening here." The evidence packets I distributed contained identical sets of documents, carefully organized and clearly labeled. Birth records, financial transactions, medical files, and paternity test results. Everything necessary to expose the lies that had shaped our family for over 2 decades. Before we discussed the house, I said, watching their faces as they opened the folders, "I think everyone should know the whole truth about our family relationships." Frank was the first to recognize the danger, his face draining of color as he saw his own financial records documented in precise detail. 24 years of monthly payments to my father disguised as business expenses, but corresponding exactly to Marcus's major life events. My father's confident expression cracked as he realized what I had discovered. "Leonard, what is this? Where did you get these documents?" "From Mom's files," I replied calmly. "Amazing how much truth you can find when you know where to look." Marcus stared at the paternity test results with growing confusion. "I don't understand. Why would there be a paternity test for me, Dad? What is this about?" Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm, her voice rising with panic. "What's happening? Why are there all these financial records with Frank's name on them?" The explosion I had anticipated began as each person processed the implications of the evidence before them. Frank Morrison, the man Marcus had always known as a generous family friend, was actually his biological father. The preferential treatment Marcus had received throughout his life came not from our father's natural favoritism, but from guilt about concealing his wife's affair and raising another man's child. Frank. Marcus turned to face the man who had attended every birthday party, every graduation, every important moment of his life. "Are you my real father?" Frank Morrison's composure finally cracked after decades of hiding behind my father's facade. "Marcus, this isn't how I wanted you to find out." "Find out what?" Marcus's voice cracked with emotion. "That my whole life has been a lie. That every time you gave me advice or helped with expenses, you were actually acting like a father instead of just being generous." Sarah looked between Marcus and Frank with growing horror. "Oh my God, the engagement ring money, the college tuition, the car payments, that was all you, not his family." My mother began crying quietly, finally releasing decades of suppressed guilt and fear. "I'm sorry, Leonard. I'm so sorry for what this has done to you." The truth hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had grown up receiving preferential treatment based on biological relationships. He hadn't understood developing expectations and attitudes that made sense only in the context of his father's guilt and Frank's secret support. "Dad," Marcus turned to my father with betrayal written across his face. "You've been lying to me my entire life. And Leonard, oh God, Leonard, I've been such a terrible brother to you." My father tried to maintain control of the situation, his voice desperate and angry. "This doesn't change anything about the house situation. Marcus still needs help, and Leonard still has more than he requires." "Actually, Dad, it changes everything," I replied firmly. "Because now everyone knows that Marcus isn't your responsibility anymore. Frank can support his own son directly instead of hiding behind our family name." Frank Morrison faced the judgment of everyone at the table, his decades of cowardice finally exposed. "I wanted to claim Marcus years ago," he said quietly. "But your father convinced me it would destroy the family, hurt your mother's reputation, damage Marcus's sense of security. So instead, you destroyed Leonard's relationship with his actual father." Sarah set her voice sharp with newfound understanding. "You let him grow up thinking he wasn't good enough while secretly funding your own son's lifestyle." The family dynamics that had oppressed me for 24 years were collapsing in real time. Marcus was learning that his advantages came from biological privilege he hadn't known existed. My father faced consequences for decades of favoritism based on lies. Frank confronted the cowardice that had shaped multiple lives through deception. "The house stays with me," I announced firmly. "Marcus, you and Sarah will need to find housing you can actually afford, with Frank's direct support instead of my sacrifice. Dad, the manipulation and guilt trips end today. And Frank, it's time for you to be an actual father to your son instead of hiding behind family friends." Marcus looked around the table with growing clarity about the injustices that had shaped our relationship. "Leonard, I had no idea. All those years when Dad favored me over you when I got cars and trips and money while you worked for everything, I thought that was just normal family dynamics." "Now you know better," I said. "The question is what you're going to do with that knowledge." Sarah squeezed Marcus's hand, her voice soft but determined. "We'll find our own place, a place we can afford with our actual resources. This has gone too far. My father made one last desperate attempt to maintain his fiction. You're destroying this family, Leonard, exposing these old secrets for revenge." "I'm not destroying anything, Dad," I replied calmly. "I'm revealing what was already broken so we can decide whether to build something honest instead." The truth was finally out exposing decades of lies and manipulation. But truth alone wasn't enough to heal the damage that had been done. The real work of rebuilding relationships based on honesty rather than deception was just beginning. The weeks following our explosive family dinner unfolded like a slow-motion earthquake, with aftershocks revealing the full extent of damage that decades of deception had inflicted on every relationship in our extended family circle. Marcus took the revelation hardest, spending several days in complete withdrawal as he processed the reality that his entire identity had been built on lies. Sarah found herself supporting a husband who was grieving not just the loss of his assumed father, but the discovery that his advantages in life had come at his brother's expense. Frank Morrison, forced into the sunlight after 24 years of hiding, finally stepped up to claim his biological responsibilities. He met with Marcus privately, explaining the affair that had led to his birth, the complicated decisions that had shaped the cover-up, and his genuine desire to build an authentic relationship with his son. "I was a coward," Frank admitted to Marcus during one of their first honest conversations. "I let your mother's husband take credit for my financial support because it was easier than facing the truth. But watching Leonard get treated like a second-class citizen in his own family, while you received benefits meant for my son, that guilt has eaten at me for years." The most surprising transformation came from my father, who faced the judgment of extended family members once they learned about the deception. Aunt Helen called him directly furious about being manipulated into pressuring me. "You made me complicit in this fraud, making me call Leonard to guilt him about family loyalty, when the whole situation was based on lies." Uncle Robert's reaction was even more severe. 24 years of lying to your own son, treating him like garbage while playing hero to another man's child, and then demanding he give up his house to continue the charade. That's not family leadership, that's manipulation and abuse. My father's attempts to justify his behavior fell apart under scrutiny from relatives who had previously supported the pressure campaign. The social consequences of his exposed lies created isolation that forced genuine self-reflection for the first time in decades. My mother found unexpected relief in the end of secrecy, despite the painful process of acknowledging her role in enabling the deception. "I thought I was protecting everyone by keeping quiet," she told me during a tearful phone conversation. "But all I did was let the lies poison every relationship in our family." She began individual therapy to process decades of suppressed guilt and fear, working to understand how her choices had contributed to the dysfunction that had damaged both her sons. For the first time in my adult life, conversations with my mother felt authentic rather than filtered through family politics. The professional consequences I had feared never materialized. Instead, several clients who had witnessed Marcus's disruptive behavior at my office expressed respect for how I had handled the family drama with dignity and boundaries. Janet, my business partner, was particularly supportive. "You've shown real character throughout this whole mess," she said. "Maintaining your professional standards while dealing with family manipulation takes strength. It actually makes me more confident about our partnership." Marcus and Sarah found an apartment they could afford with Frank's direct support, a 2-bedroom place in a family-friendly neighborhood that fit their actual budget. The process of moving into housing that matched their real financial situation, rather than their manipulated expectations, proved educational for both of them. "It's humbling," Marcus admitted during one of our first honest conversations as adults. "I had no idea what things actually cost, because someone else was always paying. Learning to budget with our real income instead of secret subsidies is like growing up all over again." Frank embraced his role as Marcus's actual father with the enthusiasm of someone making up for lost time. He helped with apartment hunting, offered practical advice about marriage and parenting, and began building the authentic relationship he should have established decades earlier. "I missed too many years hiding behind your father's generosity," Frank told Marcus. "I want to be there for the real moments now. The birth of my grandchild, your marriage, all the important times, I should have been present as your actual father." The most healing aspect of the resolution was watching Marcus develop genuine empathy for my experiences growing up, understanding that his advantages had come at my expense and that his assumed superiority was actually biological privilege disguised as family favoritism transformed his perspective completely. "I keep thinking about all those times Dad praised me for things you accomplished better," he said during one of our reconciliation conversations. "Like when you made honor roll every semester, but the family celebrated my single B+ like it was a Nobel Prize. I thought I was just naturally more appreciated. I didn't realize I was being rewarded for existing while you were punished for being Dad's actual son. Sarah proved to be a valuable ally in rebuilding our brother relationship, offering perspective from outside the family dysfunction. What happened to you was terrible, she told me plainly. But Marcus is learning, and he wants to do better. Maybe you two can build something honest now instead of whatever toxic dynamic your parents created. The baby arrived in late spring, a healthy daughter named Emma, who represented new possibilities for our family relationships. I attended the hospital visit as Uncle Leonard for the first time, bringing gifts I had chosen myself, rather than feeling obligated by manipulation. Holding my niece for the first time, seeing Marcus and Sarah together as genuine partners building their life with real resources and honest support, felt like witnessing the birth of authentic family relationships alongside the birth of their child. My father's journey toward accountability proved most challenging, but also most necessary. The loss of social support from extended family combined with my mother's newfound assertiveness about honesty forced him to confront the damage his choices had caused. I convinced myself I was protecting everyone. He admitted during our first real conversation in months. But I was really protecting myself from having to deal with the consequences of your mother's affair and my decision to raise another man's child as my own. His apology, when it finally came, acknowledged specific harms rather than offering generic regrets. I treated you terribly, Leonard. I let my guilt and confusion about Marcus become cruelty toward you. You deserved better from your father, and I failed you for 24 years. The house remained mine, but more importantly, it became a symbol of successful resistance to manipulation rather than a source of family conflict. I hosted my first family gathering there 6 months after the truth came out, watching relationships that had been poisoned by lies slowly heal through honest communication. Extended family members who had been manipulated into pressuring me offered individual apologies, acknowledging how the false narratives had distorted their understanding of the situation. Aunt Helen brought her famous apple pie as a peace offering. Uncle Robert helped me install new security features to prevent future unauthorized entries. The garden I had planted during my first year in the house bloomed magnificently that summer, the apple trees producing their first significant harvest. I invited Marcus and Sarah to help pick apples for Emma's first taste of solid food, creating new memories based on choice rather than obligation. Frank Morrison's transformation from hidden supporter to active grandfather brought unexpected richness to family gatherings. Watching him openly claim his relationship with Marcus and Emma, taking responsibility for his choices rather than hiding behind others, demonstrated that even decades of cowardice could be overcome through honest action. My mother's therapy progress became visible in her improved relationships with both her sons. No longer burdened by secrets that required constant management, she could engage authentically with each of us according to our individual needs and personalities. "I feel like I'm meeting you for the first time," she told me during one of our regular phone calls. "All these years I was so focused on managing the lies that I couldn't see who you really were or appreciate what you were accomplishing." The most profound change was in my own sense of family identity. For the first time in my adult life, I felt valued for who I was, rather than guilty for who I wasn't. The constant pressure to prove my worth through sacrifice had been replaced by relationships based on mutual respect and honest communication. My accounting practice thrived without the distraction of family drama, allowing me to focus on serving clients and building the professional reputation I had always wanted. The house became a genuine home, rather than a symbol of disputed ownership filled with friends and chosen family who appreciated my hospitality. Looking back on the entire experience, I realized that exposing the truth, though painful, initially had served everyone better than continuing the lies. Marcus developed genuine independence instead of false entitlement. Frank learned to be an actual father instead of a hidden supporter. My parents faced consequences that forced real growth rather than comfortable denial. And I learned that family loyalty should never require self-destruction, that love doesn't demand surrender of personal achievements, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable other people's comfortable fictions. The life lesson that emerged from our family's crisis was both simple and profound truth and boundaries. Though painful, initially create healthier relationships than enabling lies and manipulation for temporary peace. Real family members support each other's growth and independence, rather than demanding sacrifice to maintain dysfunction. Family should be a source of strength and encouragement, not a system of exploitation where some members' needs automatically supersede others' rights. When families become vehicles for manipulation rather than love, the healthiest response is honest resistance rather than continued submission. The baby's first birthday party, held in my backyard under the apple trees I had planted, represented everything our family had gained through choosing truth over comfort. Marcus and Frank worked together assembling Emma's new swing set, while Sarah and my mother prepared food in my kitchen. Extended family members who had learned to appreciate honesty over manipulation helped celebrate new life, built on authentic relationships. As I watched Emma take her first wobbling steps across the lawn I had worked so hard to create, I felt deep satisfaction knowing that she would grow up in a family committed to truth rather than comfortable lies. The house I had refused to surrender had become the foundation for healthier family relationships based on choice rather than coercion. Have you ever had to stand up to family manipulation that disguised itself as loyalty? Sometimes the people closest to us create the most pressure to abandon our boundaries. But real love supports our growth rather than demanding our surrender. I'd love to hear about your experiences with family dynamics and how you've learned to protect your achievements while maintaining relationships that matter. Thank you for listening to my story and allowing me to share this difficult but ultimately healing journey. I hope my experience encourages you to value yourself enough to resist manipulation even when it comes from people you love. Remember to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more real stories about overcoming family challenges. Share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing about standing up for yourself, and comment below with your own experiences or thoughts about family boundaries. May you always have the courage to choose truth over comfort, and may your family relationships be built on genuine love rather than guilt and obligation.